So thank you for joining us. My name's Dennis and I'm from Wavelink. So this session today is with our healthcare business unit, Connected Health. So I just want to welcome everybody. Today we're going to be discussing healthcare device lifecycle management. Joining me today is Michael Schlachter from Claroty. So we'll get Michael to introduce himself in a minute. So just kick over to Michael. And Michael, perhaps what we should do is just to start off with an overview of the Medigate platform itself.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Thanks for having me on today. So I'm Michael Schlachter, a solution engineer with Claroty, based in the Gold Coast, and I cover the Australia and New Zealand region. And I've been with Claroty just over 2 years now. So yeah, let me get the demo up and running. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So in terms of the Medigate platform, the Medigate platform's a network visibility tool. It allows healthcare delivery organizations, HDOs, to gain insights into what is connected on the various networks. But not only does the platform specialize in medical devices, as you can see on the screen here on the left, but also the platform is able to profile operational technology devices, IoT, as well as your traditional IT managed devices. So how does it do that? So the system, the appliance that we install on site, it monitors your span traffic coming from typically the core switch, could be other switches around the different networks. And from there, it performs deep packet inspection, or DPI, to then further profile the various devices based on the real-time communication, the protocols, but also, yeah, that just highlights all the different protocols that we see on the network. Currently, across the medical, IoT, and OT, we support just over 400 types of protocols. And then also, not only do we monitor the networks through SPAN, but the Medigate platform also supports various integrations which help enrich that data that we see on the SPAN traffic. And we'll dive into some of those today. So if I jump into the medical device overview here, it'll present with a table view. So each row will be a device that's been detected. We can see like the IP address, MAC address, the different networks where that was detected, as well as manufacturer and the different types. But we also like pictures. So to get a category overview, we can see that according to the amount of devices per category or per type, and then also look at how many models there are on the network, and also look at the risk profile of those devices. So that's the core functionality, is just getting that deep visibility. And then from there, we can start looking at other modules and use cases that the platform provides. So if I just jump into the module overview, very high level overview here, what we're able to see is we have the visibility and insights. As I said, that's the core functionality. We need to have that visibility first of all. From there, we have the vulnerability and risk management module that profiles the device in terms of the risk. Could be things like the CVEs associated with the types of firmwares or operating systems of the medical devices, but also what is the risk in terms of the behavior of the device? Is it talking to the internet, etc.? The second module is the anomaly and threat detection. So since we're monitoring the traffic in real time through that span traffic, we can alert based on various signatures or indicators of compromise or anomalies as we detect that on the wire. And then also in terms of alerting, we can create alerts based on things like end of life for a certain device or functionality recalls. That type of information we get from the various feeds that we have into the Medigate platform. The third module is the network security module. So that module is where the Medigate platform provides out-of-the-box network security policy recommendations. So because we can see the traffic, we can recommend security policies, which then have that clinical context. So it's very medical specific. It's not just a MAC address or an IP, but it's got that clinical context. And from there, we can push those policies from Medigate into like a NAC or a firewall to then do that enforcement. So that's important because we can't always patch medical devices or other devices on the networks. So as a mitigation for that, we can apply security controls by doing enforcement and policy-based enforcement. So that's the first three, and then the last one obviously is today's objective, is doing a run through on the clinical device efficiency module within the platform.
So Michael, it's a very comprehensive solution, and we're going to do a deep dive into one of those today, the clinical device efficiency. What kind of people within the healthcare organizations are going to get the most value from this overall solution?
Yeah, so the teams that would benefit would be, first of all, the cybersecurity teams. So the teams there that want to understand the risk of connected devices on the network. And again, it's not just medical, it's all connected devices. We call them cyber physical systems. The second team would be the networking team. So as I said, being able to profile those devices and allow better enforcement with that clinical context. And then lastly, the biomed or the clinical engineering teams who ultimately manage these devices across the connected networks.
Okay, so I think we're going to focus on the biomedical teams today, right? Because that's they're focusing on operational efficiency, which is really what the clinical device efficiency module is all about.
Yes.
Could you dive into that?
Yeah, sure. So what we'll do is on the menu here, we have the operational efficiency module. We have the overview. So from here, very high level, before we tackle each use case here, we can see things like efficiency recommendations. From there, we can also look at the inventory. So looking at reconciliation between what assets and devices have been detected on the network versus what a customer's CMMS database may hold. So we'll tackle that as well. And then also the location. So as I said, we can integrate with various other technology stacks that customers have. One of them being the switching infrastructure. So from there, we can pull out, especially for wireless mobile devices across the different hospitals, we can track and locate the device based on which network it's connected to. And then ultimately the overall utilization. So looking at your fleet, looking at all the devices, how they're being utilized, are they under or overutilized, for example. So yeah, that's the very high level of the four ones we'll talk about today.
And so why is the utilization data so important, specifically to the biomedical teams?
Yeah, so in order to maximize the return of investment, so I mean, everyone's purchased all these devices, purchased this massive fleet. It's important to understand how they are being used. So for example, are they overutilized? Is a certain device being used more often than recommended, or even on the other end, why are they underutilized? Maybe there's a couple of devices that are underutilized, ultimately costing the organization's money. So it's also understood that on average, around 43% of mobile devices are currently underutilized, but that shows that there's always room for improvement. Also, understanding how and when the devices are being used, that could, allow for better informed decisions or program of works, like if you needed to do preventative maintenance or look at patching or upgrading libraries, for example, on the devices. It's good to understand, rather do that in a off-peak time than in a peak time when the devices are being utilized. So what I'll do is, let's look at the utilization here. So from the platform, we can pick up utilization on a network activity, but then also through an integration, which I'd mentioned earlier. And that integration, especially for imaging devices, is the PACS. So the PACS communicates with the DICOM protocol. So being able to integrate with the PACS, we can pull out all that utilization data and enrich the passive traffic. So what I'll do, let's pick the ultrasound, for example. So here we can just see the overview, 51 devices in our ultrasound category with a utilization rate of around 55%. Clicking on that, we then have deeper insights into what are those 51 devices. So we can see the table at the bottom here. We've got the 51 devices that make up all the ultrasounds. We can see the utilization rate sitting at 55. 5 of them are underutilized. We have optimal range of around 16 of these devices, and then also 30 devices are currently overutilized. Let's say we wanted to compare, which hospitals have devices and what is their utilization. We can expand this. So for our 51, we can see they spread across 2 hospitals in our demo system here. So between Columbia, there's 46, and Washington have 5, with some other insights, whether they're under, over, or optimal range. And then let's say the team wanted to further investigate. Let's pick a device. So if we wanted to investigate, let's say the GE devices, I'll simply filter on the GE. It's giving me the 4 devices here. So selecting the first one will take us into what we call the single device page. So here we can see all the information pertaining to this single ultrasound device. We have the device name, the current status, the model, which is important. If you think back, we spoke about the vulnerabilities in that, but that's another use case. If I go to the utilization tab here at the top, what it shows is that now we're narrowing down into a single device, so 75% utilized. Some other stats, so typical hours, the averages between daily usage, obviously then the idle hours, and also the examinations. If we scroll a bit more down, we see a heat map. So this is the weekly hour distribution. And you can see the different coloring. That's representing, how often that device is being utilized. We can see on a Wednesday, it's pretty full, the utilization. The weekend, Saturday, Sunday, it's a lot less utilized. So that's a good indication of when this device may, you may undertake some preventative maintenance on the device. If the team wants to pull this off the floor on a weekend, that's at least giving you some insights. I wouldn't be doing it on a Wednesday, but at least with this data, the team can make more informed decisions. If we go to the utilization over time, this is a weekly representation. There's some other examination details here. So this is, again, per the weeks that have passed, how many examinations. And as I said, with the integration with the packs, what we can do then is break down the different body parts and the examinations that have occurred with this ultrasound. So we can see, 12% on the head and neck. So we can break it down looking at the different examinations. And what do the examination data look like? So that is the last section of the utilization for the single device. We have each entry is a specific examination that took place. So we have obviously the serial number and the AE title. So that helps us collect the data from the packs for the specific device. And then we can look at things like the duration. So that contributes to the utilization of when it's been used, how many images were taken as part of the specific accession number or session that the device was being used. So that's a lot of information that all feeds into being able to give us that high-level overview of the single device utilization, but also, as we started, roll that up into, if I click on the device type, we jump back to that whole fleet of ultrasounds. So we can then, again, as an overview, look at the distribution. So how many average daily devices are there in use across the whole fleet? So of those 51, almost 42 are in use daily. And then other things like the devices used in the past 3 months, that's all of them. If there were some that weren't being used in the last 3 months, that's, we have that data to help the teams go and investigate that. And as we saw with the examinations, this is the total amount for these ultrasounds, for example. So a lot of information there around the utilization, but ultimately we want to monitor all the utilization data and pick up that overutilization, but then also the underutilization.
So Michael, why would a device be so underutilized, and what's the cost or what's the impact of that underutilization?
Yeah, so there's many factors to this, but what we found is, for example, one of them is around the training provided for certain devices. Maybe the hospitals have onboarded a new manufacturer for, let's say, ultrasounds or infusion pumps, but the staff, aren't comfortable with them yet. So maybe they're not using the newer fleet that's available to them. But also what we found is the availability of these devices. So especially with mobile ones, like your infusion pumps, they tend to go missing or hidden in certain areas. Maybe staff have their favorite type of infusion pump to use. So that could create an overutilization for one, but then it means a whole lot of others are being underutilized. So as part of that, the platform is able to show us that location data. So let's jump into, we'll just go back to our medical devices here and go to our nice pictures. Let's go down to our infusion pumps here. So across the board, we can straight away see we've got 3,700 devices making up, comprised 5 models. So let me click on that. And what we can then do is let's take the first one, an Alaris infusion pump. It will take us to the single device page for this infusion pump. Again, we can see, we don't see the device name. It's obviously the IP is presented there, but the manufacturer, the type, and obviously the model. If we look at the network attributes here, we can actually see the various networks it's part of. So it's part of the 901 VLAN, it's the Wi-Fi network. And then under the location, we can actually see the site name, so which hospital it's part of. In some in some devices within the protocol, you can actually code the location within that. So we've extracted that as its says here, it's part of the adult location. And then we can see the location AP data here. So for the specific access points, we can track the device, as it connects and when it connects to the different APs. And that is done through an integration with the networking infrastructure. So your wireless LAN controller, we would integrate through that, and then the platform would ingest all the maps, the AP maps. And what it would look like then is we pull up that map from the infrastructure, store it in the system, but then we overlay it with where this device is currently located. So that's a powerful tool to be able to locate devices, to also look at, if I click on that whole map, so we're not only looking at an infusion pump, but we're looking at this whole floor 3 within the hospital. We're currently seeing 176 devices active within this network on this floor. So if you wanted to see, which devices are in this section of the hospital, we can then click on it and it will give us those different devices that are connected there. So a lot of information around. Sorry, Dennis.
I was just gonna go ahead.
No, so cool. So yeah, a lot of information around the location side. If we go down into the additional details, we can actually show the history. So there's a lot of there's only one entry here, but as the device changes APs or changes floors, we can track it. And the alerting module, we can set up a custom alert if it were to say change floors or change APs. So if you wanted to, track your critical infusion pumps, for example, if they change floors, create an alert, and you could then be notified of when those would change.
So Michael, one of the questions that sort of occurred to me was, hospitals are going to have a CMDB system in place. Doesn't that provide location information for the devices?
Yeah, well, not really, because the devices, when they are entered into the CMDB program, they may have that location. As I showed, there might be a location embedded within the protocol, so the different department. But that's it. It's simply a single snapshot in time of when that device gets entered into the CMDB database. But as the months, years go on, that device will move around. It may change actual physical locations to another hospital. If a new fleet is onboarded, the older one could be shipped out to a different location, for example. So it's important to have that up-to-date database. And if we look at this inventory here, I touched on it in the beginning, but we can see here, this is the CMMS reconciliation overview. So what the platform is able to do is, you can see all the Medigate devices on the left. So those are what is being profiled and detected on the network itself. Obviously, that's a live representation of what's happening within the hospitals and the networks. But then more importantly, there's the CMMS database on the right-hand side. So to give you a better understanding of that, I'll jump to the integration. So let's say we wanted to integrate with a CMMS or a CMDB tool. All the integrations that are out of the box are provided through the dashboard itself. So we can look at just highlighting the CMMS and CMDB side. So there's a couple here out of the box. Don't worry if there's not a tool here that's that you have. We do have a full API integration, so we can still push and pull attributes from Medigate into your CMDB tool. So if we look at, let's say, aims, for example, let's pick this one. Some of the attributes that we would be able to transact between the two platforms, we can import asset attributes. So that's pulling in from the aims database. So things like tag number, the status, is it rented, you know, is it part of the procurement, who owns it, what is the department it's part of. So those attributes can be pulled into Medigate. And then also, as I said, we can push. So from Medigate, we can push things like the RP, MAC, you know, where that's got PHR data. If we've seen that on the network, it's not the actual data, it's just a flag to say that there is PHR. We can push that across to the various aims details. So I'll show you there. Let's go to the CMMS reconciliation. So here, taking it that step further, this is now where you can start matching and understanding what has been matched and what still needs to be matched. Maybe we're missing, you know, a certain attribute, so the system can't automatically match the device, but we can see, let's say for the clinical devices here, we have 6,887. There are still potential matches. So we've only got 6,200 in our CMMS. So there are potential matches there, but you can see how we have matched 5,100. And moving into the unmatched, we can then get a better understanding of what's still in the Medigate platform. So that's the top section here. And you can simply choose then, you know, on the unmatched CMMS, there is a recommendation or a suggestion of what the platform thinks it should be matched with, but it just needs that extra approval to match it. But majority of the devices have already been automatically matched. So that allows, yeah, organizations to, you know, keep an up-to-date inventory, especially with all these regulations, the SOCI regulations and that are being enforced. Having that up-to-date inventory of devices across the hospitals is becoming more important as the days go on.
Michael, there's been a question come in relating to the integrations that you were talking about earlier. Yeah. Perhaps this is a good time to ask it. So the question is, can this integrate with common RTLS infrastructure for seeing location data, especially for mobile devices such as infusion pumps?
Yeah, so if there's nothing out of the box, but through the API, we could bring in that information. The second point is we would also detect those devices on the network, because those RTLSs would be connecting to the Wi-Fi if they needed to be updated in that. So yeah, we would detect, and we have seen them in other deployments. We've seen the RTLS devices, but we could, by all means, if there's an API integration, we could pull in some data as needed with that.
Okay, excellent. And so if someone's interested in sort of looking at the Medigate platform, what would the next step be?
Yeah, so they could contact, you know, obviously Connected Health, you know, through yourself, as well as reaching out to me directly. But yeah, obviously we'll have our contact details in the session, and by all means, yeah, reach out and we can set up some, you know, typically the way we would allow customers to test this is through a proof of concept. So we provide an appliance, and we also then set up the dashboard for them, and then they can actually use this dashboard with their own data to better understand the platform, but also get a better understanding of their networks and the gaps within, you know, the various maybe security controls, etc.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, look, that's fantastic. We kind of hit the Q&A time. If there's any questions that people have, please put them in the question section of the toolbar. There's one other I've got while people are entering potentially other questions.
Yeah, I see some others there.
So functionality recalls and end-of-life information. Can you explain how this solution helps there?
Yeah, so in the alerting, as I said, we've got that the alerting side of the platform. What we can do there is there are out-of-the-box or predefined alerts. So we have different categories. There's deviation alerts, that's for the policy side, risk, segmentation, and threat. And then if we actually look at the alerts, these are the current alerts within the demo system. So here we have, let me turn off those and let's look at functionality recalls, for example. So what the platform has done is obviously created that visibility and profiled the devices. We then take feeds from multiple sources, the FDA, for example, TGA, all the authorities, and then when there's a recall or a bulletin or a notice that goes out, when we ingest that, we actually marry that up with the, if it matches a model number that a customer may have or a device type. So we can see, if we just take this first one, for example, there's this functionality recall Z1499. It pertains to 5 Philips Heart Start devices. So I'll click on that. And then this gives the user a lot more information around it. So recall number, then the date posted. So back in 2020, it's currently still open. And we provide the source. So there's a link there from the FDA where this recall originated from. And then it talks about the types of affected products, the different territories. So this is worldwide. We could have one specific to the APJ region or the EMEA, etc. And then more importantly, we actually tell you which devices those are. So we've got 5 of them and we list the 5 here. You could assign these to a group or a biomed team or a certain individual to then investigate, but that's the level of detail we can provide for functionality recall. And the same goes with the sorry, what did you ask about? The end of life. So if I go back to here, device end of life, so I've just filtered on that. We show, you can actually see the first 2 here are PLC information. So not only do we do the medical side, but as I said, we cover operational technology and IoT. So obviously having these devices on the network is still a risk to the whole organization. But if we move down, there's one around the patient monitor end of life. So we can give you a rolled up view. Okay, there's 106 of them. If I click on that, again, details of this alert are shown here. So we've got, when was the end of life state? That was 2019. If we do have the end of sale, so it might have been end of sale, but not end of life yet, we'll show that. It's coming from GE themselves. And then you can work through, there's 106 currently of these patient monitors that are flagged as end of life.
Okay. And you were talking earlier about sort of device efficiency and utilization.
Yeah.
The platform, it can provide recommendations around that. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So on the operational efficiency overview, we see the first one is the recommendations. So here, very high level, we can see there's a total of 44 recommendations, and that affects 3,600 devices. We can see the different details on what the recommendations are, but let's dive into them. Let's pick some examples and work through them. So I've gone into my 44 recommendations. 0 have been resolved, but as you work through these, you can resolve them, and that ticks them off. So as you start improving on these recommendations. But let's take this first one, for example. So the type is underutilized rented device. So what that's actually saying is that there are 709 devices labeled as rented in your CMMS. So remember, we had that CMMS integration. We could pull the status. So we pulled the rented attribute across to us, and then we marry that up with the utilization data. So that's telling us that the hospital has rented a whole lot of equipment, 709 devices, but they all been well, 709 of them are underutilized. So that goes back to that return of investment, making sure that if you are renting devices, then how are they being utilized? So we put some smarts in there and correlated that information. We show the sites. So there's the 4 different hospitals that have been labeled. You could then filter it for each one if you wanted to tackle only the Washington site, for example. But some other recommendations in the same aspect around that utilization or the online data, we've got here that it's rented still. These 405 devices are rented, but they haven't been online within the last 90 days. So it's not even that they're underutilized, they just haven't appeared. So either they still exist within the networks, but we're not detecting them through the traffic or through the wireless integrations. But also on the other end, maybe the CMDB is out of date. Maybe that flag it's been marked as lost or stolen, but that's a good indication of understanding the device, whether it's been online within the last 90 days. I think there was one other good one I saw here. So if we look at maintenance, so yeah, we spoke about maintenance, that maintenance window. So finishing off this question, we can look at the infusion pumps. So for 151 infusion pumps, we've noted that the last PM date, so the preventative maintenance date, coming from the CMDB again, we've noted that it was over a year ago. So straight away you can see, the team can understand there's 151 devices that either haven't been maintained or the database hasn't, the CMDB database hasn't been updated. So it warrants just a quick investigation, and if they have been updated, then you can update the CMDB, and then we'll update our alert accordingly. So yeah, that's an example of some of the efficiency recommendations. Are you there, Dennis?
I was muted. Very efficient, underutilized. So we'll just wrap things up now, everybody. So thank you so much for attending. We will send a recording of today's session to you. And if you do have questions that you may think of later, please feel free to reach out to either Michael or to our Connected Health team. We will send out the contact information to you. So thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dennis. See ya.